So welcome to our podcast, Beyond the Tech, powered by Cisilion. Today's podcast will be covering IT in the legal space. I will be your host today. My name is Mini Biswas. I'm a modern work and security specialist, also STEM ambassador, a mum in tech, recent Tech Women Award winner, and hold a criminology degree, which kind of all relates to the subject of the focus today in a roundabout way. So I'm delighted to present today's discussion. How can IT help to shape the utilization and realization of lawyers in a law firm? So on this podcast, we welcome our panellists. We have Kerry Angel, Nina Gratrick, and Annette Brown. I won't steal their thunder, so I'll let them introduce themselves following the first discussion. So let's kickstart our questions. So question number 1. Tell us in a few sentences, what is going on in the world of the legal industry? What type of challenges are you facing in your organisation today? So if we can go with Kerry first, then Nina, and then Annette.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I think one of the major concerns is always going to be cybersecurity. So I think bad people have really ramped it up recently. So we certainly need in the legal industry to be extremely on the ball, ahead of the curve for the ransomware attacks and so on. So making sure we've got all our cybersecurity in place will probably be one of the main focuses, certainly in the coming few years as well.
So I think the biggest question that we're trying to answer at the moment is whether or not Gen AI will make the lawyer redundant. And if it will make the lawyer redundant, how will it make the lawyer redundant? And ultimately for law firms, how do we prevent that from happening in a way that still enables us to be commercially viable, but also to be able to service our clients using modern technology? So much of what we're thinking about, talking about, grappling with at the moment is what the lawyer of the future needs to look like. And at what point do we start to build the lawyer of the future? Do we start in schools? Do we start at university? Do we start with the trainee contracts? And where do we really need to be thinking about not just doing things differently, but not doing them at all? Okay, that's the biggest question. You know, we're in a moment of industry disruption. And the real question is, how much disruption do we want? And where, if we do disrupt, will we be able to still add value?
And I think mine is a combination of the two. I think the bad actors are using generative AI in a way that we've not seen before. So understanding how that will impact a law firm. So not only using the generative AI, but understanding how the cyber criminals are using it to their advantage. And we've seen a lot of imposter stuff coming through from, fake email stuff to people, to faces, to, passports. There's a raft of stuff out there that they're using to their advantage using the technology that we're trying to adopt. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. And you've touched upon some really, hot topics at the moment. Is very known in lots of industries, but specifically the legal industry is quite really, really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. So last year, a report by the Solicitors Regulation Authority showed that 75% of law firms have been the target of a cyber attack. So why is the legal sector a target for criminals? What kind of measures are being explored to help tackle the issue on the rise? And if we can go with Nina first, Annette.
So the reason that we're a target is because we keep people's secrets. Yeah. Client privilege means that we know all sorts of things about our clients that our clients perhaps don't want the market to know just yet. And particularly if we're dealing with anything contentious that might be reputationally damaging. So lawyers have a very privileged position. Law firms have a very privileged position. We also have massive amounts of data. And so it's quite easy for somebody to get in if we're not really, really careful about closing all the doors and shutting all the windows. What we've seen, I think, over the last 5 years definitely is an absolute drive to make sure that we know exactly where all of our data is, how it's being processed, how it's being managed, what we're doing with it, but then also to really educate the workforce. Because and you will hear, I'm sure in every industry, that they talk about, the human firewall being often the weakest link. So much of what we do now is around education, training, awareness, and making sure that people understand their responsibilities in terms of protecting the data.
And we're cash rich. So they know we have money to protect that data, and we'll pay premium to make sure we're not exposed and that we protect our clients' data. And I think, ransomware is up there because we can afford it.
I think the ladies have answered that question really well, but I will also add that I think we are, law firms do tend to be cash rich, absolutely right, but also reputational. There are a lot of law firms, but you only have to look in the news, and as soon as somebody gets hit, it's like, that's it. And the clients will move. The clients won't necessarily stay somewhere where they've, their law firm has been exposed by, a scammer. So we certainly just need to be aware of all of that, reputational as well as monetary.
And I would like to say it's really good. It's not good that a particular law firm gets hit, but it makes a really powerful business case. Definitely. When you're trying to make, when you're trying to ask for money for anything to do with cybersecurity, it is, we don't want to be the next whoever they were.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And if you think about what hits the media, that's still only a very, very small percentage of what actually happens. So by the time it's hit the media, the reputational damage for that firm is quite considerable. And so it's an easy ask sometimes in order to bolster your security, your security posture in the event of these things happening.
Yeah. It's interesting, all your points, and that's exactly sort of my research that I found. Another point to this is we're seeing a rise in mergers and acquisitions and lots of consolidation of organisations. And so in many areas, legal practices handling these significant changes, and the time pressures associated in the transactions and everything else that goes part of that. Even those law firms get targeted purely because people want to know about these mergers and acquisitions happening that may be affecting shares and sort of stock prices, etc. too. Brilliant. So we'll move on to our next question. Can IT actually be looked at as a commercial benefit to the business? So can you share examples? And we'll go with Annette first, Kerry, and then Nina.
Yeah, I think many firms have tried to see the commercial element to the IT team. I think it's very difficult to prove because we touch so much. It's very difficult to quantify it. And I know IT managers and directors who have tried to build themselves out to the practice areas, but it becomes very complicated because it's so entwined with everything that all the practice areas do. Is how do you actually charge anything out? So yes, I believe there is a commercial element, but I think to prove its worth and the value of that is very difficult. Yeah. I never tried.
I think as well, there are occasions when you can sell an aspect of your IT function to clients for a particular purpose. So if there's something like a program that you run in-house that you think clients will want to buy that in addition, then I think that can be an option. I certainly know that partners will take a look at the bottom line for our IT budget and go, where is my X million of pounds going? What am I getting value-wise? So having to justify a lot of it is part of being an IT director's role, I think, is saying, we have to put X amount of money into cybersecurity and we have to put it into our Microsoft licenses and everything that you expect, you want on your desk, we will have to budget for. So I think it's getting the business understanding how much each person of IT is worth. But certainly going back to the question about making it commercial, I think there's potential for aspects of it to be sold externally of the firm, but it does depend on what it is, and you do need to be quite clever with it.
So I think it comes down to a question of what do we want to be known for within the firm. I do believe that more and more we are extending beyond traditional legal advice. So we most definitely have a legal operations advisory group who help clients optimize their legal operations, their in-house legal operations. They talk to them about good ways in which to manage matters. They talk to them about good ways in which to work with third parties, etc. So I see our opportunity within the tech environment to be supporting those conversations. We do this really well. We use this product or these services or these people or this process or this standard really well. This is how we did what we did. Here is the technology that might be able to help you do that based on your business processes as part of our role in being your legal advisors. And part of our role of being legal advisors is to make you better at all the things that you do. So I'm not sure necessarily that our short-term value is in the selling of our tech services. The one thing that we will see is more services via subscription as we build out our digital marketplaces and our Gen AI capabilities. And as we use those tools internally and as we use those tools with our clients and more people want to use those tools, the ability to monetize that usage I think is something most definitely we will explore. So I don't see that as the traditional IT perhaps that the three of us are involved in, but that forward, outward facing marketplace, I think is going to get more competitive because that's the thing that differentiates lots of law firms. The ones that have got really, really forward thinking products that are out in the marketplace, they are the ones that attract the most attention, or they do that.
It's like IT as a service in a way, isn't it? And or lawyer as a service, or
I think it's recognizing the business process, recognizing the legal process that's underpinned by a piece of technology. That doesn't necessarily mean you either have to work with that particular law firm or that you need to do that piece of work with that firm. You can go in the same way that you go to an app store. I want an app that does X. I might go to HSF's portal, they might give me something that does X, or I might go to Harbottle's portal, they might give me something else. I think there's a shift in what we would consider to be a commercially viable model for the technology function.
Great, thank you. So according to the recent announcements last week, actually, from Microsoft Ignite, including their Copilot AI offering and integrating the use of an AI tool into, say, new hire benefits, as in sort of a benefits package when new hires are coming on board, that can significantly enhance the onboarding and daily work experience for employees, making it an attractive perk compared to competitors who might not be offering such tools. So supporting things like, facilitating better communication and collaboration, summarizing meetings, integrating tools, such as Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, looking at AI tools just in general and where life is moving now. Have you tried it yet? Are your firms supportive of it? More skeptical at this stage, would you say? And anyone can go first, but it'd be good to sort of understand sort of the AI mindset at present in legal law firms right now.
So I use Copilot every day. I love it. I use it for documents. Somebody sends me something, I use it for document summaries. When I'm creating a document, I use it for FAQs. I use it to summarize my meetings. I run a global team. Not everybody can be there all the time. So we use it to summarize our meetings, list our actions. It is a digital assistant in that respect, which I think is really helpful when you're dealing with an awful lot of data. I use it to summarize all of the emails that I've forgotten that I need actions from and take all of those. So for me, at a personal productivity level, it really just helps condense my catch up in a way that would take me too long. We're very proactive in terms of finding the use cases within the firm, really wanting to see what areas might have the biggest impact. We have our own private ChatGPT instance where, again, we're looking to see what areas have the most impact. It's hard because lawyers are very, very time poor, and asking them to sit down and have a bit of a play, that's non-chargeable, maybe. That's really difficult. But it is in those moments of play that you're likely to get the biggest gains, but it's a hard ask. And so then they come to the likes of us and go, what should I do? And we're like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know, tell me what I should do. And that's really hard because what works for me may not work for them.
And it's also getting used to prompting,
Yes.
isn't it? Actually knowing what context to add, what outputs, the way you want it back in. And it's not the same as just putting a Google search in, right? So it's kind of just getting used to that whole mindset. But apologies, carry on.
I think that there are, I completely agree with what Nina said, that, that I think lawyers do need to be given the chance to play with some of the tech to get the most out of it. I also think from a client point of view, I certainly know that we have a few clients who have asked us not to use AI. That's a part of having a fear of AI maybe, or the kind of information we're storing about certain people, I think is important to have at the back of your mind, that it's having a trust of whether that data is going anywhere when it goes into the AI cloud, as people imagine it to be. So I think we have to be aware of what our clients need, put their mind at rest about certain things, make sure our own security protocols are around the AI function that we do use to make sure the data doesn't disappear anywhere or goes into the whole ether of goodness knows where. So, we just need to be aware of what our clients require as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think a combination of the both, but it also comes down to cost and the size of the firm. I mean, I've been privy to a lot of discussions around the sort of divide in law firms where the smaller firms can't afford the licensing fees for some of the tech because it's quite costly. And there's the other firms that are racing ahead because they've got the money to invest in it. So there's kind of, I think, not only culturally, but economically, there's going to be a bit of a divide on what firms are doing because not everyone can afford to take that leap. And if they're a small firm, that leap of faith can be costly if it fails.
Yeah, and all important points, and this is the kind of difference between that corporate responsible AI, versus the consumer models out there, because users are already using ChatGPT or AI models in their own way, shape, or form, and it's not a matter of if anymore; it's a matter of when. And organizations sort of creating a more safer way to access, especially with data on the line. Is such a huge thing to think about, and it's only on the rise, right? So people are now actually starting to have a think about how is my AI model and adoption journey going to move forwards. And Kerry, you're absolutely right. There's going to be lots of people who are very fearful of what that holds, and where the security measures come in. So really, really important topic actually. So this leads me nicely onto the next question. How can IT help to shape the utilisation and realisation of lawyers in a law firm, which is obviously our tagline question. But it'll be great to understand from what you're doing with your organisations and what you've seen in your experience around how IT can shape that utilisation and realisation of lawyers.
Shall I start with this one? So I think getting, and we have spoken about this in the past, but I think getting under the bonnet of how a law firm actually works, how a lawyer sits down and bills their hours, where are the pain points in their day-to-day working? Are there gaps where they're spending hours and hours and hours doing a job that could be done really quickly with an AI tool or by another form of tech, workflows, all those kind of things that you would think would come naturally, but it doesn't. So we certainly do need to make sure that we understand exactly what a lawyer does on a day-to-day basis and how, as I said, where the gaps are, where are the pain points of how they're spending all their time so that they can bill more time.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be enablers, basically.
Yeah.
We have to enable them to do their jobs more efficiently, but they don't know what they don't know. And so the education piece is important. This can help you, it can save you time, but then to Nina's point, they don't have time to sort of play around with things. So it comes back down to, the billable hour again and how much time they've got. So it's important to get a very succinct message across to them about how this can actually help you and improve your workflow. And that's quite critical.
So I think some of what we've got to do is we have to have a laser focus on operational resilience. Every time a lawyer sits down and can't do the thing that they want to do because of something that we're doing, and we might have told them 7 times that we're going to be doing the patching over the weekend, but we really kind of need to understand the impact that has. But our focus on operational resilience has got to be key. And it's got easier. Now we're moving so many of the services into the cloud. We've got third parties that are managing an awful lot of that. It's got much, much easier, but that's got to be one of the things that we focus on. I think the other thing that we've probably got to be really aware of is that so much is changing so very quickly that one of the benefits of having people like us in the organization is less about the answers that we know right now, but more about the people that we might know who to ask. So you want to do that in the future, or you think that that's a bit of a problem, or we know a bit of tech that might be able to help. Who do we connect in order to have those conversations? We've all been in IT organizations where we've run a help desk now collectively, I guess, for goodness knows how long.
Switch off and on.
But those, and although the types of problems have changed, we're still dealing to a certain extent with people who haven't reset their passwords and done all of those things. And we need to find ways in which to minimize that noise, and then to give people then the space in order to be able to think about creative ways of doing their work, and then support the creative ways of doing that work. Utilization is a hard one. We talked about it a little bit before. There's only a certain number of hours in the day. And if you give a lawyer 20 minutes back, what do they do with that 20 minutes? Does it take 20 minutes off the end of their day, which would be fabulous? They get home to go and see their families, they get home earlier. Or do they end up doing 20 minutes more work for something else? I think that question of utilization and productivity and how that translates into things that are better for the people and the firm is really important. Otherwise, what you do is you have things that are driving productivity. People are doing more and more and more, but they're not necessarily having more free time in order to do the other stuff. So we've got to be careful about the balance.
And it's so important. You've raised a really good point there around measuring how do you measure?
Yeah.
Is it an Excel sheet that you start putting your time? Even that takes admin time to do, right? So it's actually finding those, ways to find that productivity and getting a measurement on that. And that is also a hard part to sort of navigate internally, especially when you do it across one individual to different teams and then across the board in an organization. So those are good points you raised there. With the ever-growing demand of hybrid working, especially with wider access to collaboration tools now, including basic apps from a mobile device as well, people can access from anywhere. What role have your teams played in facilitating this? And were there any concerns? And obviously, we've seen a lot of this following, the lockdown. But, the tools are there, and they have been for a while, actually, but only now it's starting to ramp up. How have you personally been involved? Any concerns, any good things, talk me through your journey.
Yeah, I think with, certainly my experience through COVID was really interesting. With the law firm I was at, we had implemented Zoom, and no one used it. Right up until the end of March 2020, when suddenly everyone needed to use it. The lawyers had never worked from home, ever. No one had ever worked from home. Then all of a sudden you get thrown into this vat of everyone must be at home. So it's amazing how quickly the lawyers picked up stuff to work, how they worked. That there was no IT training on certain stuff. That they were thrown into it. And I happened at the time to have done a mobile phone rollout. Great timing. Right in the middle of COVID, because it had already been planned. And I think if we weren't in COVID, it would have been an absolute nightmare trying to get everyone to bring their phones in and swap the SIM cards out and all that kind of stuff. Whereas it was all done remotely, and the feedback we had was, it's all right, my child was at home, they did it for me. And I think that was a whole kind of, wow, you can do it yourselves rather than having to handhold all the time. So that the way that certainly the service desk and the IT teams at the firm I was at, they completely changed the way they were supporting people and what they were supporting. You know, we're not trying to look after your broadband, for example, but we can give you tips on how to improve the speed and everything working from home. So I think it certainly changed at the time. Has it gone back to the old days? I don't think it's gone back exactly the way it was, to the level of knowledge that people have got. But I think certain lawyers are falling back into that old, oh, no, I can't possibly do it. I need to get IT to do that. Where they, in COVID, they probably would have done it themselves or get their 5-year-old, which was a...
Yeah, I think I went from managing one network to about 250 networks.
Yeah.
Tricky. And finding that people didn't have sufficient bandwidth to work.
Yeah. And didn't understand it.
So again, to Kerry's point, they learn a lot about kind of home use, broadband, and how to help people. That was quite, speed test. I don't think anyone had ever run a speed test.
Yeah.
So we taught them how to do that so we could help them better to understand where things were falling down, because their knee-jerk reaction is always it's IT. And we moved away from that very quickly, and they realised actually it wasn't IT, it was their inability to either work from home or their broadband wasn't sufficient. So it really changed it. And I think, again, to Kerry's point, we've gone back. They've gone back to, I can't do it, I need help, whereas before they just did it.
I think some people certainly have gone back. And I think, saying what Annette was saying is that there are, particularly during lockdown, the kids were off school. So you'd have somebody doing fortnight in the attic and the lawyer trying to work at the same time, and maybe Netflix was on and everything was being used up. And so trying to articulate that to them, that it's not an IT issue as such. Check your broadband. You're in the middle of nowhere. Is your broadband sufficient?
I think for me, probably the biggest challenge during the whole hybrid working is the crossover between all of the things. Before there was a real separation between your work equipment and your home equipment. And what happened during COVID was we have to do everything everywhere all at once. And I want to be able to do it on my iPad and that presents a challenge for us because some of those devices are really difficult to manage at a corporate level. I think at a people level, particularly for those of us that manage international teams, it's a godsend because you're leveling out the experience. So within where I am at the moment, HSF, we've just done 2 regional Ask Me Anything sessions, and we've had everybody dialing in remotely. So that doesn't mean that the people who were in New York or that were in the Middle East or even in Belfast felt that they had a very different experience. It was everybody was on a level playing field. And we don't do it all the time. And we absolutely encourage people to come in. We absolutely encourage people to consider the personal connection as part of the job they do. So it's not just, can I be in meetings for 12 hours? It's can I take the time, make the relationships, etc. But I see it being a little bit of a generational thing as well. I do see people who have recently come into the workplace expecting more remote services than we've got. And when we tell them, oh, don't worry, you can literally use your phone to book a person to come to your desk because we have a Book an IT Analyst app that's available. They're like, oh, great. Yeah. I think. Whereas the other people will just be, I'm phoning you, send me someone. So I think there's a shift in terms of expectation that's generational.
And on that point, actually, because I think we spoke about this on one of the calls we were on, but the younger generation and the exposure they have to a working environment, and the more, remote working is in play, them, not being able to meet someone who's working from home and having a chat when they're making a coffee, for example, So in terms of that hybrid working setup and the younger generation now coming into as their first job, for example, what any concerns around that, or is it working well in your organisation?
I think with that, the people that are coming through as having their first job now are probably the ones that had to do A-levels during COVID, maybe. So, they would have had to do a lot of Google Classroom and all that remote stuff. And, they got through their exams and so on. So they're coming into a workplace maybe expecting a level of hybrid working. And as Nina alluded to, we're trying to encourage people into the office to get that the human intervention bit done. And I think where people have survived COVID and coming into the workplace now, they've not had that. They've not had the you must be in the office 5 days a week and we're going to have formal meetings together. So maybe a more structured approach to building relationships face to face. Teaching them that side of it will become more prevalent as the years go on, maybe.
But I think we also saw at the conference that guy talking about, bad actors pretending to be somebody they're not. If they never come to the office, you never know that. And they found that, didn't they?
That's true, actually, yeah.
They found a young guy who had been, fabricating who he was to lots of firms. And when they discovered him, he had about 15 laptops with all different firm names. He'd got jobs in all these places and literally wasn't an actual person. He was just somebody who had got himself in to do some damage to all of these networks and infiltrate to get money. And so if they're not coming into the office, I think you've got to think about that aspect of it.
Yeah,
too,
I do too.
And who is doing the work.
Sounds a bit like catfishing, doesn't it?
It does.
It was amazing.
Oh, God.
To listen to it, but definitely in person is something that should be part of their.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of it anyway. So.
Very interesting point, Annette. Thanks. So moving on to our next question, how to navigate the various applications and where to start. So what tools are you using day to day? And I guess, with being in a law firm, you've got obviously the Microsoft stack, you've got all these other different apps that you're using. Where do you start?
Phone up one of your friends and ask them, to be fair. Look, I think the legal IT, the landscape is quite, it's quite narrow. I mean, it feels like it's not when you're talking about a couple of 100 core vendors, but I would be pushed. It's only when you walk out of Legal Geek that you might think, I'm going to use that application. There's probably someone within your network that's already using it. So what I do think we do is there's a high reliance on some really key vendors. I manage Thomson Reuters, Litera, obviously Microsoft, all of those sort of big ones in the application space, and some challengers. So there will be people that come up and they're challenging and they'll have a really, really great product. One of the biggest questions that we always have to ask ourselves when we pick up one of those niche products is how long is it before one of the big players buys them? Because because invariably that happens. Yeah. But there are quite a few products now that are trying to solve a very specific problem for a very specific group of lawyers, and that can be really helpful. The big thing for us is always integration. So you can't buy a standalone product that doesn't work with everything else. So if you go to them and you ask them about whether or not they integrate with iManage or
have APIs, basically.
Or have APIs. If they don't have really strong ones that you can then make work within your environment, or they're not quite sure, or they'll build it for you. That's the other one, isn't it? Oh yeah, I don't have that yet, but I could build it for you.
And cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, that's not really where I want to be. Because frankly, their competitors have already thought about those sorts of things. So the application stack, I can't think of a product. I probably only think of one product in the application stack that I've started in my new job that I think has surprised me in terms of I really like it and I can't quite understand why we haven't used it in all of the firms that I've been at. But then I signed the invoice and I realised why I probably haven't used it.
Did you share which one it is at all?
So it's NextThink.
Okay.
So it's digital user experience management. And it's a great product, but it's complex. But yeah, it's an interesting product. And I think it does exactly what it says on the tin, not wishing to.
But I think as well is when firms say they've integrated AI into the products as well, when you've got a massive amount of products and you think, if you're changing yours significantly, how is that integration going to work? And I always say to my friends when they talk about it, so it's a bit like putting mechanical wings on a bird. You have to be careful if it's going to work properly, if it's of benefit, is it going to make it better or is it going to just stop it flying? And you just have to think about how it's going to integrate when some of the firms come to you and go, we're going to, we've got an AI element now, we're doing this. And then you just think, is it going to break everything else along the way? Because if you're changing it significantly, that's always been my fear is when they make changes.
So we're going to move on to my favourite question. Talk me through your individual journeys. And all of you are women in tech, in the legal industry, in senior positions. How did you get to where you are today and what's next for you? And if we can start, Annette, Kerry, Nina.
Well, I started my careers advice in 1976, where I could have been a hairdresser or a secretary. So I took the secretarial route, but always wanted more. I came from a background that couldn't afford to send me to uni or had much cash around for education. So I did what I did, but always wanted more. So I put myself through a degree and then kind of got into tech. Well, I was tech at the beginning because, like Nina was saying about Windows 3.1, right at the beginning, I had an AES machine. I went from like a golf ball typewriter to a word processor, to then a computer, and it kind of progressed. But I was always really interested, and so I did my degree and was fortunate enough to get into legal very early on. And the rest is kind of history. I just worked through, as I said earlier, I always said yes and found out how to do it after, because I felt that enabled me to move on all the time. And I don't know why I wasn't scared of that, but I wasn't at the time. So yeah, for me, it's been something I've always known I would do. I think just pushing myself.
Thank you.
More would do it.
Really nice to hear your story, Annette. And Kerry?
Yeah, so I was one of the only females in our sixth form at school. So I was brought up with a load of boys. So during the time when you learn, you learn who you are in your A-levels. So when we all started to drive at the same time and we all, sort of went out together and so on. So I was lucky to have them. And they kind of pushed me in protecting me in a certain environment and pushed me in a certain direction. So I started off as a trainee manager for Sainsbury's and then went to their head office and was one of their customer service managers. And then I have no idea how this happened, but fell into IT training. I tell you why I think it happened, because I used to go around the southeast of England installing the scanning equipment. And had teaching people how to use the new scanning. That was when it's the blip one. It was new. It was new at the time. So I found that I enjoyed teaching people. So I got into an IT trainer for a law firm, and then the rest actually is history. So I moved around quite a lot, but every time I moved to a law firm, I moved slightly up the chain a bit more and moved to a smaller law firm, but being in complete charge of the IT training function from scratch, and then moving to a much bigger law firm and looking after it from a management point of view, going to an American law firm and learning them. And so now I'm in the position where I am IT director for Harbottle and Lewis. So all the skills throughout all those years of Cardinally all sort of put together, which is brilliant. What's next? I have no idea. And that's the beauty of it. I don't think we do know quite.
Go with the flow.
Go with it, absolutely. Go with the flow and see where it goes, because who knows? So 3 months in, still enjoying it.
Inspiring story. Thank you, Nina.
So, goodness, as a member of an ethnic minority, the options when I was young were doctor or lawyer, and I wasn't going to do any of that, and definitely not dentist. So engineering was a viable, I guess, third option. And when I started, I did a placement during my degree and thought, I'm not sure I can do this. Primarily because I was one of the only two girls on my degree course, and I was the only girl that was there in the placement. And it wasn't because the job might not have been interesting, but I couldn't see myself in that environment all the time. My first job was as an IT trainer, and I was teaching people how to use Windows 3.1, drawing it on the board, minimize, maximize. And I was very much, I very much enjoyed those light bulb moments, particularly when you started to teach applications around how people could really transform their everyday work in ways in which they didn't know that they needed to do at that particular time. From IT trainer, I moved into a sort of service desk support role. From there, I became a customer services manager. One of my first managerial jobs was managing an outsourced team of 120 people.
Wow. And
to Annette's point, sometimes you just say yes and then work out. I went from 12 to 120 and you just work it out kind of thing. And it isn't, I don't think, that you fly by the seat of your pants, but you sort of recognize you have to take every day as it comes. And you just have to do your best every single day. And after that, moved into a couple of other different sectors, started in law just over 20 years ago, always managing international teams, always been in this role, which is the bridge between IT and the business. And in every single one of the roles that I've taken, a bit like Kerry, I've done a number of different jobs, all in law firms. They've always got a little bit bigger. And this role is, as an IT director at the moment, it is absolutely the bridge, not just between the technology department and the business, but, other digital teams and the technology department and all of those other different webs that we weave in order to make sure that technology works in the right way. And I'm loving it 6 months in. It's a great place to be. I get asked lots of random questions all the time, and the problem solver in me absolutely loves that. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
Oh, I love that response, Nina. Love your story. No, thank you so much for sharing those stories. You really showed that you proved your worth along the way as well, right? And you've got to where you are with that hard work, effort, and just this lovely confidence in all three of you ladies as well just shines through, which is so nice to see in leadership positions, because how many women are there in leadership positions in IT as an IT role in a legal firm, right? So it's so inspiring to hear all your stories. So we've only got a few more questions left. My next question is, looking ahead, what emerging technologies do you believe will have the most significant impact on the legal sector in the next, say, 5 years? I'm going to put one out there. Is quantum computing one of these? But, just any emerging technologies you can see and think about that might have a really huge, significant impact.
So I suppose the question that we're asking ourselves here is what's going to impact the legal environment versus what's going to impact the tech environment. And they might be two very different things. We've talked a little bit about Gen AI and the disruption that it may bring to the legal processes. And I think that's still yet to be explored. Your question around quantum computing, that's a vendor-led question. So some of what we will have to do will be led by some of what our vendors end up doing. And it really becomes sort of a race for them to do more, faster, hopefully cheaper, with less resources. That's going to be one of the big things that we're going to have to be tackling. All of us will have sustainability goals as part of the corporate strategy. And this expansion in terms of our cloud and our Gen AI will require us to think about better ways in which to deliver that technology that will need to be driven by the way in which our vendors are going to develop their services, I think.
I think some of it will be led, as Nina's said, about from a vendor point of view, but I think also from our client point of view, what do they want? Do they want AI across the board? Do they not want that? Do they want a different level? Do they want client portals? Do they, what do they want that we can help and provide them? So some of it will be generated by that. I've no doubt AI will be fundamental to law firm, but to what extent? How in depth will we go? What about from a court point of view? What do the courts want us to do? So I think there's quite a lot of elements there. But, Nina's right. It will be driven by vendors, by the courts, by clients.
Yeah, I think the courts are important in that they're so behind.
They are, aren't they?
And if you think about American law firms, certain jurisdictions, the judges want things in certain formats and ways. And I can't see that in the UK changing that much. They've only just allowed technology in the courtroom.
Yeah, true.
And if you think how long the internet's been going, literally, I think emerging technologies are great and they're going to be good. And again, it's going to be the divide. Those that can afford them will be using them. Those that can't are just going to sit behind with their quill pens like they've done in previous. I saw the rise of the internet, and there were firms that still didn't have cloud up till, a few years ago. And you think how long our firm's been in the cloud, it's frightening that some still aren't and don't even have a strategy for it. So I think it's a massive landscape legal, and you go from, the barristers' chambers right up to, the magic circle.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got everything in between. I think it's a vast...
And even like the UK landscape when it comes to, the legal sector and the use of tech as well. In the last 20 years, we can see already how much change there has been and us having to adapt in those environments too. So what else is next to come is kind of a similar methodology, right? So we just get behind it. And
I think like with generative AI, we didn't know it was coming and it came and everybody, this big burst came very quickly. But we've been doing sort of artificial intelligence stuff for many years, but the generative part of it came very quickly. And so, that I think it'd be difficult to predict what will win the race.
Yep. And it kind of leads me nicely on to my next question, which is how do you think your organisations can leverage these sort of advancements to stay ahead in the legal industry? So obviously with some of the technical, technologies we've mentioned, what specifically is your organisation doing versus a competitor, for example, that might not be using some of these tools?
I think certainly some law firms and where I am at the moment, we have an innovation team. So the bridging the gap between what lawyers want and what clients want to what technology we currently have. Do we have a stack already in place that can fit the gap where the lawyer's time can be better spent elsewhere? And this goes back to one of Nina's points earlier. But I think having this innovation area which allows them to be more creative, to see if a new technology that's coming would be good to plug a gap that we have or we haven't got, but then having a really good transition piece that moves it from innovation to BAU and making sure that service transition is correct, making sure it fits in from a security point of view and all those lovely bits.
It's a tricky one. I think, every law firm is doing similar things to Kerry. There's a focus and a group. I think the ones that will succeed are the ones that are really strategy-led but technology-enabled. I think the ones that put the tech out there first for the tech's sake are going to struggle as the tech evolves. Where organizations have a very clear strategy, what clients, what markets they're looking to develop, where they're really looking to have their focus, and then look to explore what these tools can do for them in that space. Those are the ones, because I think they've got focus and energy, I think those are the ones that are going to really see the benefits. The biggest challenge is, holding the door closed against all the madness sometimes when, and we've got to, our job as gatekeepers, part of the group that gatekeepers are, to structure the governance, the ethics, to make sure that we understand all of the little bits around the edges, which are not just it's a nice shiny piece of tech, but also to make sure that the value we're delivering is part of the strategy, because you want to drive revenue, profitability, growth, reputation in a particular way. And there's a lot of stuff happening out there that doesn't seem to necessarily be aligned with the underlying strategy of the firm. Yes, there's a technical ambition or a technology ambition, but I think that's going to be hard to maintain over time, if I'm honest.
And I think they want to be the best, right? So they're going to be watching what everyone else is doing. And I think if you've got a strong network and you're fortunate enough to have people that you can share your ideas with, I think those firms as well will be successful. And it's down to the network of their IT directors, because they're the ones that are going to be listening to what other firms are doing. So they're going to have a little ear out for what's happening, where those that don't.
Yeah, I think so.
So we move on to our final question. So one that resonates with me as well, because I talk about this in my daily discussions, and an area Cisilion are experts in with our IT solutions. But what is the best way to empower legal firms and tech leaders such as yourselves? What do you look for in an organisation or service offering? Can IT be sold as part of the offering to the client? That's something we discussed. But in terms of working with strategic partners in your adoption journeys, what do you look for in a service partner?
So we talked about this a little bit before. They have to know our business. We get an awful lot of calls from people who don't know our business. They don't know our budget cycles. They don't know our business. They don't know that we're international. They'll talk to us about, I could do this for you somewhere else. And you're like, what you mean down the road from, our office in Indonesia or wherever it is? I think it's really important when you're dealing with anybody at a senior level within IT that you understand what their business does and how you might be able to help them with their actual business problem. The other question is so many vendors come to us and say, have you got 5 minutes of time? And then before they've even asked whether or not we've got a problem to solve, they try and sell. Yeah, and actually, you can be open and honest about who you are. Do you have any major burning platform issues that you would like to be talking about? Listen, and then come and talk to me about what it is that you might be able to help with. Because so much of the time, you might not be the right person for me to be talking to at that particular point. But I almost, it is that, do you make the assumption in the first 20 seconds of talking to somebody whether or not they're going to be the right person for you? And particularly with cold calls, it can be very difficult.
Especially at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, never phone up. Never phone at 3 o'clock on a Friday.
Ask me to go to the pub and now you want to sell me something. I don't think that's happening. I think, to Nina's point, definitely for me, it's always been relationship and it will never change. No, actually, in anything I do. Whatever I buy, whatever I'm doing, it will always be relationship. Do I like the person? Do I like the firm's ethics? Do they give anything back? You know, that's really important.
Yeah, we're people, we're human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. So. And for me, I do a lot in the social mobility space, so I want to know that they would help. You know, if we wanted to do some work experience or something, you know, I need to know that the people I'm spending significant amounts of money with are supporting me and the business in a way that I would want to work, and that's important.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is not just from a networking point of view and working with people that you kind of resonate what your ethics are. Also, I rarely spend money with people I don't like. So it's building that relationship with people, making sure that like Nina was saying, the cold calling, since having this new job, I've been inundated. I don't know, at least 10 a day. Leave me alone, honestly. And when you've, in the nicest sense of the word, when you've been around as much as we have, you get to know certain people and you get to know certain vendors. And I might go to Nina, I need somebody that can do that. And she goes, I recommend these people. So the legal industry is very, everyone knows everyone else. So they'll go, yeah, I recommend them. So you do a lot by reputation, you do a lot by networking, and sometimes it's down to the salesperson that you've built that relationship with, because then the rest of it will kind of fall. Getting the vendor to make sure they listen to what you need, they don't hard sell you. And I don't know about the other ladies, but I know there's been a couple of occasions with vendors that I've just struck off straight away because they've been rude, they've been arrogant, they've talked to me as if I'm about 5 years old and don't know anything about IT. And so they go on my bad boy list. And I will make sure people know that. But because I don't need that.
But there's a level of empathy, isn't it? And there's a level of, and also it's so nice to see more women coming into sales roles as well. But it's kind of making sure there is that diversity in that spectrum space, because that kind of, not that you relate to this person if this person calls you or anything like that, but also it kind of just opens that whole barrier of everyone kind of, seeing each other as role models in the industry as well, and you're kind of mutually talking in that manner. But I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to each of our panelist guests, Kerry, Nina, and Annette. Thank you all so much for your contributions. A huge shout out to Cisilion's marketing team for making this podcast come to life and going beyond expectations. Please feel free to get in touch should you wish to go over any of the discussion points in more details, especially around AI, modern work, cybersecurity. All of our LinkedIn details are provided in the commentary below. Please do connect with us. And I'll leave it there. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.